Hello everyone, my name is Basilisk and welcome to this rambling rant video. Okay, so reviews. You've probably read them, you've probably watched them, and you're aware of how much they can vary in terms of quality. You're also probably aware of how much reaction can vary in terms of these reviews. And I think part of that reaction is that people go into reviews expecting the wrong things. Now, what the hell do I mean by that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. See, people go into a review, they expect sometimes they go into a review and they expect how to make how to improve a game, or how to make the sequel better, or what we could learn from the game, or how to sorry, I'm having a bit of an analogy attack. Uh or things of that nature. But that's not actually what a review is for. All a review is there to do is inform your purchase decision. Now, that's not to say, though, no, that's not to say analysis or tips on how to improve or what we can learn can't be in a review. In fact, I tend to prefer reviews that have a bit of that myself. But that's not what a review is for. It's there to inform your purchase decision, or at a pinch to bring exposure to something that was passed over. Reviewers like Derek Alexander do that one a lot. Um, Now, outside of that, there are, of course, some other issues. Uh, how good does a reviewer have to be? Things of that nature. And we'll get into that in a bit. But first, I want to talk about this first thing: what to expect from a review. Now, I do get wanting that analysis and whatnot, but most reviews are done on an incredibly tight schedule. Take something like Dragon Age Inquisition. I've sunk about 40 hours into that game over the past 2-3 weeks, maybe, and I haven't beaten it. I haven't 100%ed it. I haven't even come close. Now, a review, especially a professional review, like for IGN or something like that, that those games have to be reviewed within. The reviews for those games have to be done in about 3 to 4 days. That's a lot. That's a really short time. They don't have time to for a lot of these games. They just don't have the time to get in and do that kind of analysis. Now, I hear you saying, but what about shorter games like the Call of Duty franchise? You could beat in about 6 to 8 hours, something like that. I could understand that, except again, they still have to get those massive games done on a reasonable schedule too. So what actually happens is they play their Call of Duty game, they get the review up, and then they spend the rest of the time they had to play Call of Duty written up, and then they spend the rest of the time they would have used to play Call of Duty for their review, and used to try and get some extra time in on one of those long games like Dragon Age Inquisition, Mass Effect Andromeda, something like that. Those long games, and that's why you don't get that analysis. Usually get that analysis in professional reviews. But even then, that's again not the point. Uh, Even for reviewers that have more time, because they're not bound by a schedule, Angry Joe, Total Biscuit, uh, Derek Alexander. The thing there is, a review is still at its most useful when it comes out either before a game is launched or very shortly after it. So even then, they tend to put themselves on a strict schedule. Now, okay. Now, I myself, when I do a review, I do tend to put a bit of analysis in it. But that's just because I tend to do reviews of games that are fucking years old. So I have the time. It's not like me not getting this review out tomorrow is going to affect anyone when the game I'm reviewing was a Nintendo 64 launch title or something like that. Sorry, bumped my mic. But even then, the focus is still on on explaining what kind of game you're getting into rather than breaking it down. So, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I do get why people want that out of the reviews. Just don't go in, but you'll have a better time with reviews if you don't expect it. What you want for something like that is you want to look for that analysis specifically. And for that you want features, not reviews. Now, but that's a pretty easy thing to get around. The trickier question is, how good does a reviewer have to be for a review? And yeah, that's where it gets a little sorry, allergies again. That's where it gets a little trickier. Because some people will say, oh, a reviewer needs to be completely up to date on that game and its franchise, and they need to be masters at it, blah, 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 blah. No. No. Stop that. That is exactly what we don't need. Because someone who goes into a franchise, someone with that kind of level of investment in a franchise is going to be incredibly biased. They'll overlook flaws. They'll justify flaws, things of that nature. If they're that level of committed to a franchise or a game, they're pretty hardcore fans of it, and you're just... their viewpoint is going to be insanely skewed. Now, that kind of viewpoint does have its merit, but that's not something you want that much in reviews. In truth, for a review, you do want you want as big a spread of experience and, what is the term I'm looking for? Experience and familiarity with the game, with that game as possible. Because that means you get more opinions, you can look at it from as many different angles to see if this is something you really want to get into. And I get when I do get when you're a big fan of a franchise and you go into a review alright, I'm a big fan of Fire Emblem and The Legend of Zelda. If I go into a review for a Fire Emblem or Zelda game and I see comments that are just plain dumb, like that review of Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, where they gripe on the game for not having motion controls or Wii support. And yeah, that's a dumb fucking comment, because I mean, what in the hell would you do with them? But for someone who's not familiar to the franchise, though, that might be a reasonable request. I'm too far in to say myself, or a reasonable thing to wonder why it's not there. But that doesn't... So yeah, I get that frustration, but we don't want to... But by limiting reviews to only the kind of viewpoint that's really close in, we would actually be hurting ourselves. Now, for the other question, how good does a reviewer have... Now, on the far end of that, we do see reviewers like the Cuphead review recently, or farther back, the Doom review, that one Doom review, where the person playing the game doesn't actually seem to know even how to basically play the game. Like, it's just their first time picking up a controller. And yeah, we do, yeah. If you're going to review games, you need to have some basic familiarity in the genre. You need to know, how to run, jump, and shoot how to run, shoot, and aim at the same time, or how to fucking run and jump at the same time in a platformer. This is not complicated stuff we're asking for here. It's literally hold the button forward, maybe press down A, and then push B to jump. So yeah, not that tricky. I'm not looking for absolute mastery here, but I mean, some basic literacy is important. But then there's the other problem, and this one comes up more and more and more and more and more, and it's kind of starting to grate on my nerves. We saw it with Breath of the Wild, with the Jimquisition review. We saw it with Doom in a couple of its reviews. We're going to see it again and again, and we've been seeing it over and over. And that is when a game that is massively popular, Ocarina of Time, Final Fantasy VII, Breath of the Wild, Horizon Zero Dawn, Doom, Cuphead, yada yada yada, and they get reviews that aren't bad necessarily, but they're not complete rave reviews. The Jimquisition review of Breath of the Wild, for instance, was, I think, something like a 7 or an 8 out of 10, not a particularly low score, and he got lambasted for it. I mean, the whole reaction was, oh, you didn't like this game that I was a huge fan of, that got all these rave reviews? Well, you're just a terrible person, causing controversy for the sake of it. And you just should stop reviewing and shut up! Stop it! No! Okay? That is not useful to anybody. Just because a game is popular does not mean that everybody has to like it. All you do when you start that kind of crap is you damage yourself, you damage the industry. No! Stop. Just stop. Okay? It does nobody any good. Now, I get the reason behind this. And part of that reason is the fact that Metacritic just needs to go. Okay, the problem with Metacritic is that it is a review aggregate, and a lot of people only use Metacritic as their metrics. Metacritic is fucking awful for reviews. Never visit Metacritic. The reason it is awful is because it distills the opinions of hundreds of different people operating off of different scales into one number. No, there's no context for that number. There's not even a context for the numbers that made that number. 10 out of 10, or an 8 out of 10 is not the same thing as an 80 out of 100 or a 4 out of 5. And even two 8 out of 10s might mean different things because two different people gave those scores. They're using two different metrics for them. What's an 8 out of 10 for Angry Joe might be a completely different thing for an 8 out of 10 from Jim Sterling. Okay? And using something like Metacritic it's worthless. It's worthless, okay? But that aside, just because someone disagrees with popular opinion doesn't mean they're selling out or just trying to cause controversy. Or if they agree with popular opinion on a game you don't like, it doesn't mean they don't have a spine or they're getting bribed or paid off. All right? People have different opinions. Opinions are very important. Without an opinion, we'd all be fucking sheep, okay? Do not go around the internet harassing reviewers because you disagreed with them. It hurts the industry. It hurts the games you want to get made, and it makes you look like a jackass. Besides, okay, knock it off. Now, there are people that do. Now, to be fair, there are people that go against things just to cause opinions, but they're usually not reviewers or anything of that nature. Usually, you can find them on forums being internet trolls. Okay. People who do this who do reviews either as a passion hobby or as a job, they're not generally going to cause trouble for the sake of causing trouble. This means more to them than that. Now then, the last thing I hear people going on about is reviews need to be 100% objective all the time. I get that opinion because it means that a review isn't getting tainted just because a reviewer likes this or that game so much. But it's not going to happen, all right? It's just not going to happen. A review is always going to be colored by bias. What the reviewer likes or dislikes in terms of genre or what their experiences with the game are. And because video games are transformative media, no two gaming experiences are going to be the same. Unless I suppose you're playing something like the Stanley Parable, maybe. Anyways, back on topic. So, yeah, while I get wanting objectivity in reviews, it's just not going to happen. What I mean is, but they do need to disclose that bias. Like, if they don't like first-person platforming, it's good of them to come right out and say that. Of course, that doesn't stop people from claiming that they didn't disclose that bias, as we saw with Total Biscuit's Titanfall 2 review, and his response to that, but, people are going to be idiots. But that aside, what I mean by it's impossible to tell even if someone goes into a review trying to give it a fair shake. Let's say I do a review of Call of Duty Modern Warfare alongside Resistance 2. Now, and then for the sake of variety, we'll throw in Doom 3. Okay? Now here's the thing. In order, I can tell without even having to do those reviews that in order, in terms of gameplay, my preference is going to be Doom 3, Resistance 2, and then Modern Warfare. I'm not that big a fan of cover-based shooting. So if I review a cover-based shooter, it's naturally going to get a weaker score. I'm also not a fan of realistic military shooters. So if I cover a realistic military shooter and an alien shooter, even if they're both cover-based shooters, the realistic military shooter is going to get a lower score, on average, assuming they're all three of equal quality. Now, I haven't actually finished the campaign for Modern Warfare. I've only recently even got that game. So, and yeah, I'm bringing those up because I do actually plan to do a review of Modern Warfare once I finish the campaign. But, stop going to sleep on my computer. But, my point is, because I'm not a fan of cover-based shooters or realistic military shooters in general, that game is going to get a lower score than it will from someone who's a fan of those games. So, if I use scores, but you know what I mean. But that's what I mean is it is impossible to completely avoid bias, even for the best reviewer. If they disclose that bias so that the reader of the review or watcher of the review knows beforehand that they're getting into something that might disagree with their general opinion, that's helpful. And most good reviewers, do disclose their bias, or it becomes incredibly obvious during the review that they have a bias against it. For instance, God damn it, one moment. I shut my alarms off. Anyways, now, Yahtzee, for instance, doesn't usually disclose his bias up front, but it becomes obvious within about 30 seconds that he doesn't like something because he keeps shouting at it. Of course, he doesn't like most things, but whatever. That aside, you get what I'm saying by now. Don't be harassing reviewers because you dislike their opinion, because you disagree with their opinions, because they like something you dislike. Don't expect too much from a review. It's there to inform the purchase decision, and go into it expecting that, and you'll have a better time. And just try to keep calm, people. Speaking as a reviewer, it's obnoxious whenever someone comes in and yells at us for just doing our job, okay? It's demoralizing, and it doesn't help you or us, okay? Now, there are problems. There are some problems in reviews. Mainstream reviews, they do get bought sometimes, and there is that 8-point scale. Or that 4-point scale. That's a problem. We do need to fix that. And so, if someone railed against a game calling it trash and garbage and then gave it a 6, I can see where that comes from. But if someone calls a game slightly above average and then gives it a 6, 6 is slightly above average on most logical review tables. So just keep in mind that the review industry, especially the professional mainstream review industry, does have its problems, but just be calm about them. You will get more done with calm, rational protests than you will with all the anger and rage in the world. Trust me, we get so much of that we just filter it out these days. A calm, rational complaint in an email or something, that will get you a lot farther. All right? We cool? We good? Awesome. All right, thank you so much for watching. This has been Basilisk, and I will see you all in the next video. Good night, folks.